Okay, this video is called Health Hell, and we are going to talk about the relevance to nutrition and toxicology, pathophysiology. We're going to come back to this painting. I love this painting. So the artist who painted this is Dino di Durante, and it's from Dante's Inferno. It's a collection of paintings about Dante's Inferno, and this is the cover of the book. And it's magnificent with the 9 circles of hell as described by Dante. So we're going to come back to this in a moment, but there's a little bit of intro material to get to first. So for most people, by the time they get middle-aged, they're fat. And initially the obesity is usually the first thing, and then hypertension comes soon after that, and prediabetes and fatty liver, one problem after another, impotence, infertility, you start naming it, menstrual problems, etc. And what this lady probably is dreaming about is she wishes she could be thin like Venus instead of being fat like the Mona Lisa. Okay, and the good news is there's a lot of things that can be done to help that. This is the wonderful Birth of Venus painting, like Aphrodite by Sandro Botticelli. And so when Dante first was at the borders of the Inferno, the sign said, for anybody entering hell, abandon hope, all ye who enter. Okay, and so what I'm saying is that's in a sense what happens to a person when they try to handle these problems, these chronic diseases of obesity, metabolic syndrome, hypertension, diabetes, coronary artery disease, GERD, many types of arthritis, and autoimmune disease, many other diseases too. Conventional medicine calls these diseases chronic because it can never, that word is never, never, never cure them. And in a sense, that's what they're saying, just like Dante's Inferno, Dante's Hell, abandon hope, all ye who enter. What they're telling you is it's impossible to cure you with a pill. You'll take that pill every day for the rest of your life. Whereas a low-fat vegan diet routinely cures these diseases, okay? Especially if you catch it early. I mean, if you've had hypertension for 40 years, it's going to be harder to completely reverse it. Okay, the path of, the high-fat processed food diet is going to be, fat accumulating subcutaneous, then in the muscles, and you get the earliest phase of diabetes, then it accumulates in the liver, then the pancreas, and then you end up insulin dependent, and you start getting amputations and everything else that goes with the diabetes. And then if you eat the high-fat diet for a couple of decades, you start getting atherosclerosis in your heart, in your Johnson, in your carotid arteries in the neck. Carotid arteries that go up to the neck, internal carotid arteries, typically about 6 millimeters in diameter. The coronary arteries, typically the proximal ones, the big ones where you put stents in, are about 3 millimeters in diameter. If you go down low to the Johnson, the pudendal arteries are about 1.5 millimeter in diameter. So it doesn't take a lot of atherosclerosis to plug up the arteries. Stenose means narrow, or plug up the arteries to the Johnson and cause impotence. So impotence often presents first before coronary artery disease or carotid artery atherosclerosis. And the standard pathway is you just plug up arteries, things don't work anymore. They end up going for stents. PCI, percutaneous coronary intervention, CABG, coronary artery bypass graft, get the big midline sternotomy scar. They typically have gallstones, often get gallbladder surgery. They're constipated from lack of fiber, appendectomies for appendicitis, sigmoid resection for sigmoid diverticulosis, diverticulitis. BKA means below the knee amputation. Okay. I was doing a thrombolysis case when I was a fellow at Harvard, and the nurse would follow us around and want to know the catheter position where we were injecting the clot dissolving medicine. So we got into, we started on a right common femoral approach. We went around the horn, which means to go up the iliac arteries, catheterize the other side, contralateral iliac artery, come down to the common iliac, external iliac, and get into the common femoral artery, then work our way down the leg. We had the catheter in the popliteal artery below the knee, and we're infusing the clot dissolving medicine. And it was urokinase at that time. Nowadays it's TPA typically. So the nurse is asking us catheter positions, femoral artery. And so below the knee popliteal artery, we call it, below knee popliteal artery, below knee pop. So she asked me, where's the catheter? And I said, below knee pop. She goes, what? I said, below knee pop. What? Says, anyway, so it was funny at the time. Okay, Tata Hamada eating the plant-based diet, they're real healthy. Okay, and then the problem too is when you plug up all these arteries, to the Johnson, the heart, and to the brain, anything that doesn't have good blood supply doesn't work so well. So people are getting stupider. Back in the 1800s, people routinely read 500 to 1,000 page novels. Les Mis, 1,200 pages, a magnificent book. Brothers Karamazov. These are 3 of the greatest novels ever written. Brothers Karamazov, 800 pages. Big lesson learned there is Alyosha had the best life, was the best guy. Anna Karenina, Tolstoy, 600 pages. Interesting book. Tale of Two Cities by Dickens. Okay, what I like about Brothers Karamazov, I like Alyosha. I also like the idea, I sort of learned a new word. Everybody knows about a straw man argument, when you diminish the opponent's argument and therefore it's easier to defeat the opponent's argument because you've done a straw man. So you don't give a fair reflection. So what they said is, it's better to do what's called an Iron Man description of the opponent's argument. So give it a fair chance. And then I thought of the analogy to that as soon as I heard that from Brothers Karamazov, the chapter Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor, where he made a strong position for the sort of evil atheist Grand Inquisitor. And I would call that the Ivan, instead of an Iron Man argument, an Ivan Man argument. Ivan was brilliant, and the Grand Inquisitor getting a strong position that a lot of people even bought it. But it was a terrible thing, I thought, the Grand Inquisitor. But I think it's the best book chapter ever written of any book in the history of the world. So anyways, lots and lots of people have cognitive impairment. I can tell you, in my personal experience, talking to a lot of older patients, just people over 60, I expect them to be cognitively slow. They're often significantly cognitively impaired, and especially the diabetics. So anyways, these things all go together, and they're all avoidable, almost always. So now we're getting back to Dante a little bit. Dante had been exiled from Florence. He was a great poet of Italy, one of the greatest poets of all time, and he was sort of sad and lonely, didn't really know people in his exile. And then he remembered Beatrice, and he had loved her when they were young. They ended up actually not getting married, but he always thought of her, and he only dreamed of going back to Florence, and this was part of his inspiration to write his poem. Here's, I think, a magnificent painting of Dante looking at Beatrice, and this painter by Henry Holiday of Dante Beatrice. I mean, the lighting, it's just perfect. It's just beautiful. In Italy, certainly is like one of the most beautiful places in the whole world. The Italians just got taste on how to dress and how to paint. They're just good at it. They're great at it. So here's kind of a summary of Dante's life, almost like his autobiography here. Here is the Inferno, or Hell. Here is Purgatory, 7-story mountain to purge oneself of their sins and their mistakes and work towards going to heaven. And then here's beloved Florence. If only he could go back there, but he wouldn't be allowed back there because he'd been exiled. Okay. This is Sandro Botticelli's 9 Circles of Hell, illustration of Dante's Divine Comedy. The Inferno is the book 1, then the Purgatory is book 2, and then Heaven is the book 3. Sandro Botticelli was a favorite artist of the Medicis. Him and, I think, Rogier van der Weyden were the 2 greatest artists of the 1400s, 2 greatest painters. Okay, this is from Eugene Delacroix of the Cross. Dante and Virgil in a boat crossing the river Styx, and so there's all these sad, pathetic persons in hell. Dinesh D'Souza, a real clever guy, had an interesting definition of hell and heaven. He says, heaven is life with God, Jesus Christu, and hell is life without him. And there's some truth in that. A lot of truth in that. Okay, here's a painting of, now we're in the Inferno, and this is Dante. His guide is Virgil. He really loved Virgil, the greatest of the Roman poets. And he felt that, one of the greatest tragedies of all time had been that Rome, the civilization, had to some extent collapsed. So here is Paolo, like Paul, and Francesca. And basically, they had committed adultery. They just couldn't stop falling for each other while they were reading some romantic book. And it led them, then the real husband came in the room, and that was it for those two. And so they ended up in hell. At least they got to be together, but still, it's a beautiful painting. There's other really nice paintings of that. Okay, and then what was the whole point of this video? Just the idea of health, hell. And again, I see people descending lower and lower into hell. Every day I see it. Every doctor sees this every day. They take care of inpatients. I think doctors that only take care of outpatients have an unrealistic idea of how sick people are, because when you see all the inpatients, they're such a disaster. Oh, by the way, do you know where processed food is made? In Hell's Kitchen. Okay. The outer borders of hell are surrounded by the river Styx, which is filled with caffeine from coffee and energy drinks. This elevates stress hormones, catecholamines, like epinephrine, norepinephrine, same thing as adrenaline and noradrenaline, and the cortisol, stress hormone. These cause insomnia, increased risk of hippocampal excitotoxicity, and memory impairment, and anxiety and mood disorders. In the center of the river Styx, there are little islands of tea drinkers who are all demented. The tea drinkers become demented eventually because the tea concentrates aluminum, a dementogen, and an estrogen, estrogenic chemical, and fluoride. Fluoride's a neurotoxin, okay? Give me a break. I was so sad. I went to the grocery store and I looked at the toothpastes, and I can tell you about 97% of the toothpaste on display all had fluoride in it, and it would have a big sign on there that's saying fluoride, anti-cavity toothpaste with fluoride. And I'm like, God, people have learned nothing. It's been known since at least the 1980s. Fluoride's a neurotoxin, causes brain damage, and lowers IQ. You know, the aluminum companies got it into the toothpaste, and the American Dental Association's a bunch of wussies. They won't take it out because everybody's afraid of being sued. So they'd rather let all these people suffer than, you know, tell people the truth that fluoride's a brain toxin. You can look it up for yourself. It's pretty obvious information. It's got the most powerful electronegativity in the periodic chart of elements. You can look that up in 2 seconds and you'll see it's true. So it can substitute out for hydrogen and form very tight bonds. It can also facilitate making, you know, drugs more able to cross the blood-brain barrier. You know, if you look at Prozac, what is that? Fluoxetine. Well, that's for the fluoride on there to facilitate traversal. And it's neurotoxic to the brain's memory center, the hippocampus. So I wouldn't go near that with a 10-foot pole. In the first circle of hell are the meat eaters, who all have coronary artery atherosclerosis. You feed high-fat diets to any herbivore, including humans, they all get atherosclerosis. And they will get their sternum sawed open for open heart surgery, CABG, coronary artery bypass graft, and they take a vein from the leg, the saphenous vein. It's cut out and stapled into their chest. Meat eaters have back pain from ischemic spine. They don't got enough blood supply to their spine, so their discs all degenerate, degenerative disc disease. And I wrote a book about that. Ischemic spine is the most common cause of back pain. You know, and it's, you know, it's just pretty obvious. People think of just atherosclerosis in the heart, but it's everywhere. It's to the brain, it's to the heart, it's to the spine, it's everywhere. Okay, the second river of hell is sad Acheron. It is filled with high fructose corn syrup and blobs of fat. Acheron is called fatty river. Now, I hope you realize when I say saturated fat is satanic fat, I'm not trying to demonize it. In the second circle of hell, the diabetics, who all have diabetic neuropathy, painful neuropathy, and arthropathy, diabetic arthropathy, and vasculopathy, leading to gangrene, where their toes just die and they get infected with this wet, slimy bacteria, and they have to get their amputated. And they typically get one toe amputated, then the midfoot amputation, then a below the knee amputation, and if they keep on progressing, they get an amputation, you know, just at the level of the thigh. So the below the knee is called BKA below knee amputation, and an AKA is above the knee amputation. Okay. The third river of hell is Casitus, with lamentation loud. It is filled with oils of all types, vegetable oil, fish oil, GMO oils, and these increase the risk of cancer, leaky gut inflammation, autoimmune disease. All oils are bad. You shouldn't be eating any of them. Don't even think of them as food. In the fourth circle of hell, the smokers with cancer of the throat. They get their voice box cut out, like Echo, the woodland nymph, who could not speak her love to Narcissus, and they are condemned to struggle to communicate every day. When I was much younger, I think I was in my senior year of medical school, my brother was chewing tobacco, my younger brother, and I was worried that he was going to get throat cancer because I had rotated through ear, nose, and throat, and we had all these patients that had to get their tongues cut out, their voice box cut out, half their face cut off for all these terrible head and neck cancers. So I wanted my brother to quit chewing tobacco. So I invited him, this is many, many years ago, I invited him to come with me to the hospital. And he walked around, and because I was friends with all these patients, I was rotating through the service, I knew all these patients. And I asked them if they'd be willing to speak to my brother, and they had agreed to do so. And, you know, I said, here he is, and, you know, I told him about the surgery, how he got head and neck cancer from, usually they were smoking cigarettes rather than chewing tobacco. Some of them were chewing tobacco. And so I asked my brother, well, what did you learn from that? And he goes, Pete, I know what you're trying to do to me. And he just started swearing at me, and he didn't quit, but I kind of hoped that he would soon afterwards. Anyways, most people don't think the same way I do of, gee, why would I do something that's going to hurt my health? They don't think that way. Okay, the fourth river of hell is Lethe, the river of oblivion, the water of forgetting. It's filled with aspartame and MSG and MFG. Those are excitotoxins, which cause increased release of glutamate, the excitatory neurotransmitters, most common excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. Depending on what you read, about 70 to 80% of brain neurotransmitters are that form. Excitatory meaning that it activates, increases activity in the postsynaptic neuron. These increase the risk of cognitive impairment. Also of anxiety, insomnia, can cause headaches. Like Satan, MSG is a shapeshifter, changing its name and its form to trick mankind. MSG has more names than any other food. There's like 50 different names for MSG and MFG. MSG is manufactured free glutamate. The fifth circle of hell, so we're descending lower and lower, is filled with anxiety patients who make their condition worse by piling on excitotoxin effects of high sodium, high calcium, high iron, low potassium, low magnesium diet. Basically a processed food and meat diet rather than a plant diet. The fifth circle of hell, fifth river of hell, is fierce phlegethon, filled with alcohol, which burns a fire. So another, they're all burning in hell on the fire. These alcoholics stagger and fall as pancreatitis. The pancreas makes all the digestive enzymes in the abdomen. When somebody drinks a lot of alcohol, they eventually often have a pancreatitis episode where the digestive enzymes break out of their cellular containers and start digesting the patient's abdomen, their abdominal fat. It's a big disaster. It's one of the worst diseases a person can have, and they can often end up with a chronic pancreatitis where they're in terrible pain the rest of their life. The list goes on, the impotence circle, the hypertensives dragging their dialysis machines. So again, this painting is from the Inferno by Dino Di Durante. It's the cover of his book, a collection of paintings about the Inferno. It's magnificent stuff. Okay, so here's a quote from John Dryden, English poet. I am wounded but not slain. I will lie a while and bleed a little, then rise to fight again. Yeah. You know you screwed up by eating all this crap and living like a slob, and now what can you do to climb out of Plato's cave and stop listening to all the nonsense of this low-carb, paleo, carnivore, keto people who are just lying to you, trying to keep you fat and sick. And you can learn how to climb your way out of health hell. I love this painting here. It's called Sadak in Search of the Waters of Forgetting by John Martin, 1812. So he's just trying to climb his way out, and it's a tough struggle to keep learning what you need to do and then doing it till you get out of that pit of hell. Metaphorically, what's your lifeline which can accelerate your escape from hell? I like this painting called The Lifeline by Winslow Homer. And basically, your lifeline is starch. And that's also one of the reasons why I think McDougall is the best of all the nutrition expert doctors, because he tells you what you need to do. If you don't know anything else and you just want to start getting better real fast, eat 90-95% of your calories from starch. You will improve almost certainly if you got these chronic diseases, all right? Eat one of these low-fat starches like sweet potatoes, and rice. They all got 1% fat. Your body weight will start improving fast, and you'll start probably dramatically improving things overall. So that's the lifeline. Eat starch. He gives you a cohesive plan of you. I actually, when I was losing my weight, I was making decent progress, having some small relapses and the weight coming back, and I wasn't exactly sure what to do. Once I got the idea of starch from McDougall, then I accelerated my progress, and it really helped me. And that's a great secret of health knowledge. I would say out of all I've been a doctor 30 years, of everything I've ever learned in med school, residency, and my work as an attending, the most valuable thing I ever learned was humans are made to eat starch. The reason is if you know that and do that, almost everything else starts going into a good place. So now Dante and his guide Virgil, they have made it out of hell. They went through all the terrible, sad things they saw down there, and now they're at 7-Story Mountain, and they're at purgatory now. In purgatory, the idea of it is to purge one's sins and faults so that they're ready to go to heaven. And they've now reached purgatory. There's also called 7-Story Mountain, and there's some famous books about that. And so, like, what's a secret, simple slogan to remind you what you need to do? Just live like Adam and Eve, but keep the benefits of indoor plumbing and heating, okay? And so only eat stuff that comes from nature. That's what we're made to eat. This is my favorite painting of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. This one is by Jan Bruegel and Peter Paul Rubin. It's a beautiful painting. Kind of live the way humans are made to live. Okay, and I just, kind of threw this in. It's a little bit historically of a different time, of course. This is Dorothy, okay, from The Wizard of Oz. And I think it's one of the greatest movies of all time. And after all the adventure that she has in the land of Oz, what she realizes is sometimes if you're looking for an answer, it's in your own backyard. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. And what I'm basically saying is humans have a species-specific diet. I mean, it's basic. Like, it was there from Adam and Eve. And if we just follow that, we can be healthy and we don't get all these diseases, And it's like, I think it's Deuteronomy or something. The quote from there says, obey my commandments, do what you're supposed to, and you won't get any of these diseases. Okay, and then here's the painting where we have Dante, and Virgil had guided him all the way to the edge of heaven, but Virgil's not ready to go up there, and he still has some time left in purgatory, whereas Dante is going to try to help Virgil to get into heaven, and Beatrice is his guide, and they're standing right here on the outskirts of heaven, and I think it's a very beautiful painting. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed that.